It depends on the discussion, okay? But it has been done before. So basically what we're going to be seeing in these two chapters is the same exact themes that we've been talking about ever since chapter 12, and they're all going to repeat themselves again. So Abraham and Sarah are going to make similar mistakes. God is going to make similar promises and provide for them in similar ways. Okay? So here we go. Chapter 20, I will read the first paragraph up to verse 7. Okay. So from there, Abraham journeyed toward the territory of the Negeb and lived between Kadesh and Shur, and he journeyed in Gerar. And Abraham said to Sarah, his wife, "She is my sister." And Abimelech, king of Gerar, sent and took Sarah. But God came to Abimelech in a dream by night and said to him, "Behold, you are a dead man because of the woman whom you have taken, for she is a man's wife." Now Abimelech had not approached her, so he said, "Lord, would you kill an innocent people? Did he not himself say to me, 'She is my sister,' and herself said, 'He is my brother'? In the integrity of my heart and the innocence of my hands, I have done this." Then God said to him in a dream, "Yes, I know that you have done this in the integrity of your heart, and it is I who kept you from sinning against me. Therefore I did not let you touch her. Now then return the man's wife, for he is a prophet, so that he will pray for you, and you shall live. But if you do not return her, know that you shall surely die, you and all who are yours." Bum, bum, bum. Okay? Thoughts, comments, questions, concerns? What we got?
Why did Abraham do that?
Come on! Chapter 12, you should have learned your lesson. All of these promises from God, from chapter 15 and chapter 17, you would think that he would be able to say, "No, actually, she's my wife. God will protect us. Our God is our God. He is more powerful than all of the rulers in the world, whether that be Pharaoh or Abimelech, king of Gerar."
But why?
But why?
There's no common sense to it.
the common sense is difficult for us as modern readers, right? The common sense is, in order to conquer someone, you take their wives and their daughters and make them your slaves. Okay? So instead of making them a slave, he took the sister and put them in his harem. Okay? So that's supposed to be better. I'm just saying. Okay? Now, what does this say about Sarah?
She's obedient to her husband.
Well, she's obedient to her husband, but maybe to a fault,
Yeah.
right? Okay?
But she supports the lie.
But she supports the lie, which is not good. And what else? What does it say about Sarah if Abimelech, king of Gerar, is willing to take her into his harem?
She's beautiful.
She's beautiful.
She's old,
But she's old.
But she's beautiful.
But she's beautiful. So how does that work? People that are old are still beautiful. It's in the eye of the beholder.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm the same. What's
Or maybe another way to interpret it, if you don't like that explanation, even though that's good enough for me, is that he was using Sarah kind of as stock, right? Collecting whatever he could collect that might be valuable to someone else. That means it's valuable to him as well. And as king of Gerar, it's his prerogative, since they were journeying through his land, that he's allowed to take whatever he wants. Okay? Maybe, in my opinion, collecting 90-year-old women is not really what I want to do to say that I have more value or something, but times have changed, right? Go ahead.
Well, I'm just laughing because I'm almost 90 and I don't feel beautiful at all.
Oh,
You know what
that
I'm
makes me
saying?
sad. That makes me so sad. You are beautiful. Come
In a
on.
different way.
Yes, yeah.
Was that kind of
She was so
the deal
bad, she
back
wouldn't be
then?
doing
Late,
10
in later
years of
times,
Ubers.
for instance, when Solomon was reigning,
No, no.
he would go out to quote, conquer all these countries to take them in under his influence. So he always took wives and added to his harem until he had hundreds of them. And
How do you know how many? Do you remember how many Solomon had? I think if I remember correctly, you can fact check me. I think it was 300 wives and 700 concubines.
No, thank you.
I'm gonna go back to my original statement. Do you remember my original statement? That I do not understand how any man could keep 2 women happy, let alone 300.
2 a day. Back in the day.
What?
2 a day.
2, right, yeah, it's
Even
just,
Stephen, I mean, he would call.
I mean, how would you even know their names? It's a whole nother.
it's a whole.
I wouldn't even be, okay. Yeah, I don't, we digress, okay? Yeah, yes, that's part of the collection process, okay?
The
And,
culture. of it.
yeah, and if you ever see, I think it's the movie Alexander that came out in like 2006 or something. It's a really long movie. It's like 3 hours long. But that's when Alexander goes to the different places. He doesn't take a wife in every place, but he takes a concubine, right? Until he gets all the way to Babylon, and then he picks a wife for himself. Okay? Good. Pardon?
Man.
You can't take him anywhere, I'll tell ya. Right? Okay, so Sarah doesn't look good in this story. Abraham doesn't look good in this story. Abimelech doesn't look good in this story. Although
He looks better.
he looks better than Abraham and Sarah.
Yes. Because of very pretty.
Now what are we supposed to make out of that?
He listened to God because he had a dream.
He listened, well, God came to him, right? God blessed him with a dream, with a vision. Okay? But this should not be happening. That a pagan king looks better than the father of all of the patriarchs. This is a problem. Okay? What happens with Abimelech that makes him look better? Well, not yet. Not yet. He will. But what makes Abimelech in the verses that we...
alone.
Well, he left her alone. God says that's because that was the way that God wanted it. Okay, but what else makes him look better?
He returned the wives.
Not yet.
He listens to God.
Not yet. Okay, but in the verses.
Okay, so when you kill an innocent people, he's sort of...
So he says, his literal words are, but I'm innocent. I didn't know that this was a problem. I'm just acting off of the way that I normally act. And if I would have known that she was his wife, I wouldn't have taken her. Okay, now notice what God does here. Okay, God does not say, you need to stop taking women. Which is weird to us. Okay, but what does God say? He just says, return the man's wife. Okay? So God does not get into the whole morality of everything, which we would consider to be completely amoral. And apparently, in this small section, God does not care about that.
Well, too, he gave everybody free will, so if he was to tell him what to do, then that would be.
I mean, he is telling him what to do to give him back the wife,
Right.
right? But, like you said, it was so ingrained in the culture that this was the thing. Why would he, now this is the theology of it. Why would you expect a pagan king to act the way that God would want you to act?
was threatened with death.
Well, no, let me say it again. Why would God expect this pagan king not to take a woman? God's not expecting that, right? God's expecting the pagan king to act like a pagan king,
No law.
right? Well, there is law because he said that if it was a wife, he wouldn't have taken her, okay? But going back to what you said, because you're right, if God is saying, hey, if you don't do this, you're actually going to die, and everyone that is related to you is going to die. He's like, oh, whoa, 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 I'm innocent.
So he must have known the power of God and believed.
Okay, so what do we make of that? He had a vision of the true God
And God was
and
showing,
did what he said.
And God was showing his power through the mercy.
Whoa. Isn't that cool?
Yeah.
I think it is. Okay, so this kind of goes against modern Christianity. Okay, well, I'm so spiritual that I get visions from God. I'm so spiritual that I can talk in tongues. I can get bitten by snakes and it doesn't bother me. Because I am more spiritual.
You're a bragger.
Yes. But what does this text say to that?
Maybe listen to God.
That this pagan king had a dream from the true God. Okay? So when God speaks to you, if he chooses to do so, and if he doesn't, that's okay. That does not have anything to do with your faith. That's God's prerogative. And he can do that to anyone he wants.
He's the boss.
Because he's the boss and you're not. And I'm not. Which is a really good thing. Okay? So, God's message, God's will, is not based off of your own faith or your own spirituality. And that is supposed to be comforting to us. Okay? Did you have something else to say, Patty? I feel like you
No, I just, the message in this is, that was a pagan king, and look at God's mercy for whatever you.
Mercy's fine. Yeah.
It can go to the, I don't want to use this word at all, for lack of a better word, to the lowest.
To the least
Yeah.
person who you would expect to follow God.
And
Yeah,
God's,
right? So the one that would be the least faithful, we could say. And God still goes to him.
and he told them that Abraham's a prophet.
And
that he
God-
was going to pray.
That was my next point. Excellent. So, verse 7, I think it is. Yes, verse 7. Now then, return the man's wife, for he is a prophet. This is the first time we've read the word prophet in the Bible so far. Because we started at the beginning. Right? So what does that mean? Basis Los.
God has a plan.
Well, okay, God, well, you can say that every time, so you're right, but that's not, that always applies.
It's not going to be diverted by our efforts.
Well, no, think more about prophet. What does it mean that Abraham is a prophet?
He's from God, he's foretelling.
He can foretell. That's what prophets do. They hear from God and they tell God's people what to do, what the plan is, how they're sinning, how they can be redeemed. That's important. That this word comes directly from God himself. And it's the first time it's happened in the Bible. And it's happening to Abraham. We don't normally think of Abraham as a prophet. We think of him as patriarch of the Jewish culture, right? Which is good and fine, but if God's calling him a prophet, maybe we should think about him in those categories a little bit more.
Does he know he's a prophet?
That's a really good question. Does Abraham even know he's a prophet? If this is the first time the word is being used, probably not. He doesn't know what it all entails. He knows that he's had communication back and forth from God, which we could say is not normal compared to everyone else on the face of the earth that time. Okay? So Abraham should know that in his communications with God, that sets him apart from other people. But that doesn't make him a prophet. What makes him a prophet is that he can not foresee things, but God lets him know what to say, for good or for bad. Okay? That's really, really cool. So, in a couple years, when we get to the prophets, right?
Yeah.
We can do, we can talk about this. And we'll forget, and we'll be reminded, because I'll ask you, who's the first prophet, and you'll all stare at me like I'm crazy. And then I'll say Abraham, and then we'll remember it, and we'll all laugh about it all the time. Okay? So, yeah, no, the fact that Abraham is a prophet is a really important thing.
But to follow that up, there's power in that next statement too, so that he will pray for you, and you shall live. What a testimony, what a...
Okay, I 1000% agree with you, but I need you to explain it for people that may not understand.
There's a lot of ways that that's showing Amalek, I don't know if I'm saying
Abimelech, yeah.
his name right.
Yeah.
The power of God through, if you want to use the prophet or Abraham, but also to me it's a message to Abraham again.
Oh, yeah, good.
That, the power of God.
Yeah, the power, well, I'm going to go a step further and say the power of prayer,
Yeah, yes.
Right?
Yes.
okay? And that maybe the role of a prophet has prayer incorporated into it, which we had not mentioned before. So that's an important thing, right? So what does that say about us about the power of prayer? Are we all prophets? Probably not. But we've been given the gift of the Holy Spirit, and we've been given the gift of prayer. And already in the 20th chapter of the Old Testament, we're being told that prayer has power. That's really cool.
And all through Scripture, we're told about the power of prayer for us.
And yet, we don't do it.
Yeah.
Okay? So this is Abimelech. This is how it's spelled out in Hebrew. This first one is father. And then this is my. And then this is king. So it means like my father is king, or the king is my father, whichever way you want. It's not really important, but it's kind of easy to see the Hebrew in that word. Okay? Good? What?
I said easy.
Well, I can give you some harder Hebrew if you like. Good. So what else do we got? Is that enough? Did we pick it apart enough? All your questions are answered about that section? Any other words you think are good, bad, ugly, strange? Yeah?
God said to him in the dream, that it is I who kept you from sinning.
What does that mean?
I wish he, yeah.
I wish he'd do that for me! Right? Come on now! Yeah, well, and now we joke about that, we laugh about that. Does God keep us from sinning?
He puts it into our mind, it's up to us.
I think he does. A lot of the time. Yeah.
That's that Holy Spirit that's helping you.
Ooh.
Yeah.
I love the Holy Spirit. Man. Okay. Good. But God did that for the pagan king too. Right? So God uses that sounds bad that he uses, but he uses the pagan king for his own purpose.
Well, they say God can use man for good.
Well, no, don't say they say. We say it is, right? Okay? God can use evil for his own purposes. That doesn't mean he causes the evil, right? That's a whole other topic. Okay? Good. All right. So, therefore, let's mature, man's wife, prophet, pray. Good. I think we got everything. 8 through 13. So Abimelech rose early in the morning and called all of his servants and told him all of these things. And the men were very much afraid, as they should be. Then Abimelech called Abraham and said to him, "What have you done to us? And how have I sinned against you that you have brought on me and my kingdom a great sin? You have done to me things that ought not to be done." And Abimelech said to Abraham, "What do you see that you did this thing?" Abraham said, "I did it because I thought, there is no fear of God at all in this place, and they will kill me because of my wife. Besides, she is indeed my sister, the daughter of my father, though not the daughter of my mother, and she became my wife. And when God caused me to wander from my father's house, I said to her, 'This is the kindness you must do to me. At every place to which we come, say of me, he is my brother.'" What?
So the Lord would be trying to justify his behavior.
Well, okay, so he tries to justify his behavior. I would argue it's worse than that. You're right, but we need to go another step further than that.
Is Sarah his half-sister then?
She is.
Well, that's like incest.
Well, that's incest is harder to talk about the earlier you are in the Bible because there's less people to draw from. Okay? So even though the entire world is populated, right? Abraham picked someone in his own family because the family was part of the lineage of Seth. Okay? So they were the ones that still worshipped God. And so he was believing that he was doing the right thing by marrying in the faith, which is more important than marrying into the family at that point. That's not the same thing for us today, because now the faith has gone to all nations, and so the mandates that are in Deuteronomy, that you are not to marry a foreigner of a foreign nation and religion, those are not as pertinent anymore, okay? So yes, it to us is incestual. It does not seem like Isaac had any mental or physical deficits, so that was not passed down as a sin to him. Does that make sense? No repercussions of the incest is visible to us, or is known to us, I should say. Okay? So, what's worse? Abraham is lying. Sarah is lying. But they're both telling the truth. They're half-truths.
White lie.
And they're all spinning it the way they want.
And Abraham's always willing to sacrifice her for his own good. Really?
Man! Abraham's not that good of a guy.
No.
So what do we make of it? We got people spinning half-truths. We have people lying to kings.
God uses those, all people for what he wants.
Well, okay, but I yes, 1,000%. But I want to get to more of the practical part right now. Okay? So we notice right away that they're lying, that they're telling the truth, but they're lying, so it's a half-truth. And I think that a lot of the times we do that too. We notice that in ourselves. We definitely notice it in other people. Okay?
Well, yeah, because when we are being accused of something or that, we might
Just
just
going forward.
tell them just enough to get us out of the situation.
Right.
And
Right.
we're not gonna tell you the whole truth.
Right.
Right.
And nothing but the truth, so help me God. Right? Which is a whole other thing. But we see how the Old Testament, even though it's ridiculous giving up his wife to a king, also in the same exact story is 100% applicable to our lives. And that's really interesting.
And the king is furious.
Well, I mean, if you're threatened with death, you'd be furious too.
I mean, your whole family.
And your whole family. I just watched the movie I watched last night was all about this guy trying to defend his daughter from these people that felt offended by him and were trying to kill him. Like, come on. You'd be upset too. That's only natural. Good. What else? Is that it?
Well, I guess I didn't realize at that point that this was a common practice with Abraham.
This is their modus operandi.
Yeah, everywhere they go. He says, I do this.
This is what we do.
He's like, what?
We just lie to people. Oh,
At every place.
at every place I want you to lie.
And then,
But it's a half lie, so it's not a real lie, God. It's only half. It's good.
but what Abraham and Sarah did, they were actually going to be making the king sin by their,
So,
by what they did.
So it's one thing for them to do it,
But then,
but their sin, we learned in Genesis, right? Sin begets sin. And so their sin is going to cause Abimelech to sin, but he says, wait, I'm innocent, I didn't know, God, don't kill me. And he's like, no, I'll give you a chance to get out of it. You just gotta let her go. Which is the mercy thing.
So in verse 13 though, it says, and when God caused me to wander from my father's house, I said to her, and then he goes on, it's like he's almost blaming God, like, I have to do this.
I think that the God is only with the wanderer. And so it says that I said to her, so he's not, it's not like he's saying that it was God's idea to say this. It was more of like, this was his solution to solve the problem. Which again, is not something that he should be doing. He should be consulting God, especially if he's a prophet. Okay?
Yeah.
Good. But the wander is definitely connected to God. And it's interesting because in Hebrew there's no verb to cause. okay? So that's put in there because the Hebrew verb is called a hiphil, and when you conjugate it in this form, it literally means to make someone do something. So that's where you get the cause to want. So God made me wander from. Okay? Did God force him to do that? That's not how it's presented in Genesis chapter 12. In chapter 12, God promises him abundance, and so Abraham does it. So did God force him to do? It's not a forcing to, but it's more of like God's like, hey, I want you to do this thing, and so he does it. So it's not something that we need to interpret negatively.
Yeah.
It's just a Hebrew verbal form.
At least he didn't have to be swallowed by a fish.
I'm telling you, it can be worse. It can always get worse. Because even if you're in Jonah, right? And you say, well, at least you didn't get thrown in a furnace. Right? It can always get worse. Thrown in the lion's den. Okay? Good. Yeah. Alright. Good. So we'll finish the chapter, 14 through 18. Then Abimelech took sheep and oxen and male servants and female servants and gave them to Abraham and returned Sarah his wife to him. And Abimelech said, behold, my land is before you, dwell where it pleases you. To Sarah he said, behold, I have given your brother 1,000 pieces of silver. Not bad. It is a sign of your innocence in the eyes of all who are with you, and before everyone you are vindicated. Then Abraham prayed to God, and God healed Abimelech, and also healed his wife and female slaves, so that they bore children. For the Lord had closed all the wombs of the house of Abimelech because of Sarah, Abraham's wife.
So Abraham and Sarah gets rewarded for causing this to happen. And the king, he has to give all this stuff to Abraham, and he gets wealthier.
It's the same thing as Pharaoh in chapter 12.
Yeah, it's like, oh yeah, I can do this bad thing and get more stuff.
Right? I'll get the flocks and 1,000 pieces of silver. That's a lot of silver back in the day. If you had 1,000 coins of silver right now, that'd be worth a lot.
It's in my purse.
So he lies and gets away with it. It's not the best way to interpret it.
The king is bribing him to leave.
The king is bribing him to leave so that he doesn't die. It's probably a better way to interpret it. Okay?
Now the king's not gonna have any more children.
Well, he wasn't going to, but now he will.
Now he will.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought it said
Turn your page.
all the wombs.
While Sarah was with them. Okay? So what does that mean?
Sounds like Sarah was there for a while.
It had to have been longer than a day. It had to have been longer than a week,
Yeah.
a couple months maybe. I don't know. There's no way to know.
Does it really matter?
Does it really? Well, it matters when we think about how long Abraham's lie was able to be. Or if you want to think about how long he thought he could have gotten away with it. But also, on the other hand, then, you have to think about Abraham and Sarah literally not being together. That's a lot of time. That's weird. Say that you're my sister. Oh, by the way, I'm not going to see you for 9 months. That's not really the same conversation. You know what I mean? Which may sound good to some people, right?
Nice break. from-
Right.
That work.
Yeah.
And Sarah may have gone along with it because you said that if she would have been declared his wife, that the king usually took wives and the daughters and made them slaves. He didn't put them into his harem. So by saying she was his sister,
Well, and I really think it was more so that Abraham wouldn't die. Because they would kill him and then take her, right? So if they're not married, then Abraham wouldn't have to die in order for Sarah to go to the king. Does that make sense? Again, saving his own skin.
I'm wondering what Abraham is doing right now, you know.
What's Abraham doing with his time?
Yeah.
He's waiting for God to fix it through a dream? I don't, that doesn't sound great to me.
Didn't he have this huge household?
Huge household, palace, all the things.
People and servants. And
Right.
taking up a lot of the real estate that was the king's.
Yeah.
Yeah, using the.
Oh. But it's good. It's good that you're thinking that way. Okay. Good. All right. Buy him off with 1,000 pieces of silver. Everyone's healed. So we didn't get to the spirituality of them being healed. Okay. So what does this mean theologically? Forgiveness. It also means, like, we can talk about the theme of the entire chapter is kind of in this last verse here. Okay? So think about the whole Abraham story. And we can go chapter by chapter because it's only 8 chapters so far. So chapter 12, what happens in chapter 12? Want me to do it on the board? Genesis chapter 12, Abraham is called. Abram is called to move, to wander. He has the thing with Pharaoh, which doesn't necessarily go well. Chapter 13, Lot and Abram separate. 14, he gets 14's visitors? He rescues Lot, and then we have Melchizedek. Chapter 15 is the covenant with the pot passing through the carcasses. Chapter 16 is Hagar. Chapter 17, circumcision. Chapter 18, visitors try to save Sodom. 19, Sodom and Gomorrah. 20, sell your wife to Abimelech. There's a lot going on here. Okay? But in chapter 12 and 15 and 17, in each one of those chapters, God promised progeny to Abram. Okay? And now, if Abraham and Sarah aren't together, what does that do? It prolongs the problem. And or would completely cut off the promise from even happening. Because we learned in chapter 16 that Hagar is not the answer. It doesn't just have to come from Abraham, it has to come from Abraham and Sarah. So if you break up the couple, God's promise is now in jeopardy. Which is a really big problem. So then we have this last verse. For the Lord had closed all the wombs of the house of Abimelech because of Sarah, Abraham's wife. So what's the theology behind that?
God's still going to keep his promise, that would be coming to Abraham.
No. The opposite of that. If Abraham and Sarah can't have a kid, no one else is going to either. Whoa. So now they're back together. That can happen again.
There can be absolutely no doubt that when Sarah gets pregnant, it's Abraham's child, not the king's.
Bingo! Bingo! So when you talk about like the levels of the text, right? So we always start out with the simplest, and that's usually where we go pretty quickly, right? The literary aspect of the text. This sounds bad to me. This sounds good to me. I don't understand this. Why is this happening? This doesn't make sense. Okay? And then we can go to a little bit deeper theological. Can you guys even see this? Is that okay? A theological level where we say, hey, it's really important for Abram and Sarah to have a kid because it's been promised in the previous chapters. And then what did you say?
He said there's no doubt that it's going to be Abraham's child.
Then you go even deeper than the theological level, and you connect all of the things together and say, actually, no, the purpose of this chapter is to demonstrate how God is going to make his promises come true. And by the way, it's impossible for it to be this pagan king, even though this thing happened. And that's how we see God working through the whole chapter in a much, much bigger way. That if we hadn't covered these two things, we wouldn't get to this third level. And that's why it takes 45 minutes to get there. And that's okay. Right? That's why Bible study is longer than 20 minutes. Because you need the time to process all of this information. And it's why I would never be able to do anything like this in a sermon. Right? Because A, I don't want to talk for 45 minutes. B, you don't want to hear me talk for 45 minutes. C, by the time I actually got to the point, it's too late. But if you don't study this stuff, then there's a lot in the Bible that you're missing. And I'm going to tell you, for the majority of chapters, there's stuff like this that we read and we see and we've heard it before, but actually, do we really know it?
So we can focus a lot on the disobedience and on the consequences.
Yeah.
But it has to go further than that. In order for the covenant to be fulfilled,
I just got goosebumps. You hear them?
we have to see God's hand and God's faithfulness in all of it.
And you can start here. Okay? It's possible to go there. But instinctively, in order for us to process everything, we have to get through this first part first. And that's why I have you ask whatever question you want, I don't care. Because that's how you're processing the information in order for us to get to this point. Okay? So I agree, but you can't skip this. Because otherwise, whenever I'm trying to talk about this, you're just going to go back to the disobedience part.
Exactly.
Right? And then you get stuck there.
Yes. And that's what I concentrate on if I don't, remember that there's God.
So talking about the disobedience is not bad. It's good. It's really, we have to talk about it. But if you noticed, I tried to focus all of that conversation at the beginning of the class today so that we could be on that first level. So don't get me wrong, being on the first level is good. We need it. But we also, in Bible study, have to eventually move on from that in order to see the deeper picture.
That's your wow moments every week.
That's what I try, right? To show you how there's this theological level that, God took care of them. And that's really cool. But there's a deeper theological level that Abraham literally lied to go against God's promise. And God still saw him through that. Like that's the beauty of this chapter. Where normally we would just read it and be like, oh, Abraham's the worst. He lied. Half truth. I understand it. Move on. Well, I don't know. Okay. Good. And what I say this in a good way. My goal as a teacher, as a pastor, is you're not always going to be able to do this level by yourself, and that's okay. That's why I'm here, to help show that to you. But my goal is that you can start to get to this level by yourself without me. But if you don't see how it works 20, 50, 120 times, you're going to get stuck here. And like I said, this isn't bad, but there is always a deeper level to go to. Even don't get me wrong, it's the same for me, right? So just because I can go to this theological level, there's always deeper theological levels that I go to, and usually I go to that through Greek and Hebrew. Okay? That's why I love reading Greek so much, because it instantly takes me deeper than what I'd be able to go otherwise. Okay? So don't it's not like I'm the master teacher and I know everything, that's not close. This is just the 6th time I've taught Genesis. So I should probably know something by now. Right? When we get to Exodus, you'll be like, oh gosh, this guy? So. Good. We've got 10 minutes. We can move on to the first part of the next chapter. Is that good? Okay. And then we'll probably reread it, and then next week, and we'll see where we're at. Okay. So Abraham, Sarah broke it up. God brought it back together. All of a sudden, chapter 21, you read the heading, the birth of Isaac. Now we can get excited. Okay? So, the Lord visited Sarah as he had said, and the Lord did to Sarah as he had promised. And Sarah conceived and bore Abraham a son in his old age at the time of which God had spoken to him. Abraham called the name of his son who was born to him, whom Sarah bore him, Isaac. And Abraham circumcised his son Isaac when he was 8 days old, as God had commanded him. Abraham was 100 years old when his son Isaac was born to him. And Sarah said, God has made laughter for me. Everyone who hears will laugh over me. And she said, Who would have said to Abraham that Sarah would nurse children? Yet I have borne him a son in his old age. It's beautiful. Now, Nadine, someone who's almost 90.
Pardon?
Someone who's almost 90. Are you interested in having children? No.
I have great-grandchildren.
Thank you very much. No, thank you. And yet, Sarah seems pretty happy about it.
It was seen as a miracle.
Well, it's not
And
just
the answer to a promise.
yeah. Well, okay. So not only is it a miracle in and of itself, but it's also an answer to prayer. So it's a both and thing, and both are good. So that's really nice too. Okay, should give us some of the warm and fuzzies that we were kind of missing in the last chapter. Okay, good. What else?
In the first sentence, the Lord did to Sarah.
Mm-hmm.
The Lord did to Sarah.
Mm-hmm.
Does that mean that Abraham didn't?
No. It's the opposite. The Lord did to Sarah as he had promised, allowing her to have a child. Not giving her the child, allowing her to naturally conceive a child.
With Abraham.
With Abraham, yes.
They
Where-
must have been like, wow, this is what it's all about. This is finally, you know, like, it finally, it's a fulfillment. It's,
Exactly right.
wow. Relief maybe, or.
Well, I mean, okay,
relief,
so
but-
again, we have to go back to Genesis and all of the things. So chapter 12, what happened? Promise that he's supposed to go to a different land, a problem with Pharaoh. Chapter 13, separation from Lot. 14, rescue Lot with Melchizedek, he gets blessed. 15, the covenant. 16, problem with Hagar. 17, circumcision. 18, visitors. 19, Sodom and Gomorrah. 20, problem with Abimelech. They've been through a lot of stuff.
And they should be able to look back at that.
And
just-
wouldn't you think that you could take a minute to reflect and think, wow, God has brought us through a lot of stuff. In the short amount of time that we've been sort of journeying through Canaan.
And by our own mistakes, by our
And
own
through,
mistakes.
even through our own errors, lies, sins, mistakes. Now, this should read true for us, right? God still has provided for us. Whoa.
Not only did she bear him a son, but the joy that this child brought him. It wasn't like, somebody gifted me with a child at this point in life. I don't think he's happy. I think I would read it with joy or name him Isaac,
Yeah.
it just, not only did God fulfill the promise, but in at this point, a beautiful way. They see it as a great gift and brings happiness to them.
At that time, 90 was not so old. I mean, when they lived 500-600 years, 90 is nothing.
But she was past the age of childbearing.
Yes.
It said that was over and done with. Menopause had arrived.
What was it? I think I don't remember which chapter it was in, but it was like the way of women was done with her, or something like that. So, however you want to describe that, but yeah. Well, I think last time I taught it, I said she was quote unquote past her prime. I don't know if that's accurate or not. Okay. All right, so we'll continue with 21. We're going to reread that section. There's more I want to say about it, but we'll do chapter 21 next time. Next week we will not move on to chapter 22. Chapter 22 needs one full week, maybe even 2 weeks to go over that chapter. It's really, really important. So if we get done with chapter 21 early next week, we'll just end early, and that's how it's going to be. Okay? So, any comments, questions, concerns before we move on to the Lord's Prayer? Good? Good? All right. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. Awesome. Thanks for coming this morning. Please come back. Tell all your friends.